guys, welcome to a Wednesday video, and this time I'm going to be going through more steampunk books. This time it'll be young adult middle grade series. So this is kind of the first video that's actually a really long, much longer list than the last two. I already did graphic novel steampunk books, standalone steampunk books, but as we get into series, I've read a lot more of these. So young adult middle grade steampunk series that again, not just ones that are good, but kind of all the ones I've read. And I'm starting out with the 5-star series and then going into the, 4-star, 3-star, even a couple 2-star ones that I really didn't like. But again, starting with the 5-star, I'm just going to start running through them. And I will try to put the series names below. Again, I'm having a little trouble doing it because there are so many. There's not enough room in the comments to do that. But let's see how it goes. We'll get started. The first series I have on the list is the Great Library series by Rachel Caine. This was a magnificent young adult steampunk series that's set in an alternate world where the Great Library of Alexandria was never destroyed. They basically run the whole government. So all the world power is kind of based in Alexandria still, and the rest of the world is very dependent on that. There's a lot of interesting like clockwork and steampunk technology, and there's a lot of alchemy in this series. It's a very good story. I know Rachel Caine has done like a lot of urban fantasy and stuff. And I do know she recently passed away, which is very sad because I was starting to read some of her thrillers as well. But the Great Library series is, I think, by far her most interesting series. The world building is amazing. The characters are amazing. The story is very cool. Again, it's a 5-book series. The books in it are Ink and Bone, Paper and Fire, Ash and Quill, Smoke and Iron, and Sword and Pen. And if you are even just a fantasy fan, not a steampunk fan, I would highly recommend the series. It was just so good. All right, the second book I have on the list is a series called the Timekeeper series by Tara Sem. And this is about Danny, who's a prodigy clock mechanic who's very young for his station and has suffered an awful accident that kind of leaves him very nervous about doing what he loves. He gets into a small clock tower to resume his work, and there he meets this mysterious boy. It's kind of about these clock towers being people and all of that. The world building and the whole like mythology and background here were really, really well done. I really like the characters, and I would really recommend this one if you like alternate history with like heavy steampunk elements. There's some romance in here, but I really liked it, and I ended up loving the whole series. So the first book in that series is Timekeeper, the second is Chainbreaker, and the last is Firestarter, and that was just another very fantastic series. So again, the third 5-star series that I really liked is another young adult one, and that's The Falconer. I didn't buy Elizabeth May. I was like, I don't think I have the author list on this one. This is about Alina Cameron, who's a daughter of a Marquess. She's also a Falconer. Falconers have special abilities, kind of think like Buffy the Vampire Slayer type of thing, that allow them to combat like these evil, dangerous fae. This book had a lot I liked in it. It was a young woman who secretly fights monsters in her spare time. It's a very Victorian society. There's kind of a mysterious male lead, some romance, some steampunk elements, fairy, and a lot of action. So just a lot of things that I like to read about, kind of all in this one book. Again, it was a trilogy. The Falconer is the first book, The Vanishing Throne is the second book, and The Fallen Kingdom is the third book. And I really loved all of them. All right. Next one is a very, very popular series, and that's the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I do know that this is primarily steampunk, or science fiction, but it's also steampunk, and it's fairy tale retelling as well. So it's kind of part fairy tale, part steampunk, part science fiction. I just have never really read a fairy tale retelling like this before. It was so well done. The characters were easy to relate to, very engaging. It was a very cool world. The story just blended together a lot of elements that I liked. Steampunk, science fiction, fairy tale, some romance. There's alien invasions, questions about humanity of artificial intelligence, all that kind of stuff. So if you're a fan of fairy tale retellings or even steampunk, definitely check this out. This is more like futuristic steampunk, but it's very good. The first book in the series is Cinder, the second is Scarlet, and the third is Cress, and they were all really, really well done. By far, I think my favorite thing Marissa Meyer has written. All right, next one. Another, there was like a time a few like 6 years ago, whatever, where there were just a lot of very good like young adult steampunk series coming out. So this is another one kind of in that same time frame when the Lunar Chronicles was coming out. And that is The Secret Order by Kristen Bailey. This is about a girl named Meg who's left with nothing after a fire consumes her home and kills her parents. Except for this like tarnished pocket watch. She ends up working as a maid at the house of one of her father's friends. And it's a weird job since no one's ever in the house but the maids and the cook. The job gets weirder when Meg discovers the pocket watch is kind of unlocking strange secrets around the house. It was a really fun book. It had a really good mystery. There was kind of like a scavenger hunt aspect to the story that I enjoyed, and very, very neat creative steampunk devices throughout. The first book in the series is The Legacy of the Clockwork Key. The second book is Rise of the Arcane Fire. And the third is Shadow of the War Machine. So it is a trilogy, and I really enjoyed it. All right, next one on the list kind of came out during that same time as those other two series, and that is Something Strange and Deadly by Susan Dennard. This is about a young woman named Eleanor Fitt. She has a lot more to worry about than your average Victorian young lady. Her brother is missing, her family is destitute, and her mother wants to solve this problem off by marrying her to a rich young man. Of course, there's worse problems plaguing the city. The dead have started rising, and they're very hungry. And Eleanor suspects her brother is involved. So she hunts down a group called the Spirit Hunters to help, and the story kind of goes from there. So there was great world building. I really like the writing style here. The characters were excellent. It moved very fast. It was just kind of a really nice blend of steampunk, zombie, historical fantasy. So if you are ever into like that zombie stuff, this had a really good blend of that. And I really, really loved it. All right, the next one, again, another one I really loved in our 5-star series. I should say for the Something Strange and Deadly, the first book, it's a trilogy again. Something Strange and Deadly, A Darkness Strange and Lovely, and then the third book, sorry, my computer's like jumping around here, is Strange and Ever After. I did give the middle book 4 stars, but the rest of them got very highly reviewed, so, that's good. All right, then the next one on the list is The Baskerville Affair. This is about a young woman named Evelina who's raised by her grandmother in the circus, only to find out she has another grandmother that's nobility. Her noble grandmother is offering to support her schooling and her debut in society, and she's kind of struggling to fit in. But then when a maid in the household gets murdered, she's kind of drawn into this web of dangerous intrigue, power, and magic. I really enjoyed this. It's like a Victorian steampunk mystery series. There's very good world building. There's these steam barons that run everything. And Evelyn was just a great heroine. And I believe this one kind of ties into like some Sherlock Holmes stuff too. I think she's related, like some of her relatives are related to Sherlock Holmes as well. It's just a very good plot, a very fun group of characters, and a very good mystery. So that's The Baskerville Affair by Emma Jane Holloway, and that was a study in silks, a study in darkness, and a study in ashes, and again, a trilogy. All right, now we get into a very popular steampunk author, and that's Gail Carriger. The first series, again, that I really loved that I have from her list is The Custard Protocol. This is about Prudence, aka Rue, who's the daughter of Lord and Lady McCann. Those are characters from the Parasol Protectorate series, which I'll be mentioning in my adult steampunk series. She's being raised by the vampire Lord Alcadama. Rue is the world's only meta-natural, which means she can steal people's supernatural form. It's a fast-paced story. It never slows down. Highly entertaining. These are very humorous novels. Lots of mysteries and adventure and fun, and they're just really well done. So again, The Custard Protocol by Gail Carriger is 4 books long, and the first book is Prudence, the second is Imprudence, the third is Competence, and the fourth is Reticence. And then we go into the second young adult series that Gail Carriger has written, and that is the Finishing School series. This is a story about a girl named Sophronia Timonik, who is sent to boarding school for being an unmanageable young woman. When she gets there, she finds out the boarding school isn't exactly a boarding school. It might be something a little bit different. it was a great, fun, lighthearted series. Sophrony goes on a whole bunch of wild keepers, and it's super funny. And this is actually a prequel to the Parasol Protectorate series. So it takes these events take place way before everything happens with Lord and Lady Macomb. So there's 4 books in this series as well: Etiquette and Espionage, Curtsies and Conspiracies, Waistcoats and Weaponry, and Manners and Mutiny. And very fun series. I do like the Custard Protocol a little bit better than the Finishing School series, but they are both very, very good. All right. So another author that was mentioned in my standalone books, and that is Philip Reeves. So the next series is the Lark Light series by Philip Reeves, and it is a lesser known series written by him. But it is a trilogy, and it's very well done. And basically, imagine if Great Britain had succeeded at space travel in the 1800s. Well, that's kind of the setting this book takes in. Art and his sister Myrtle live in this house, Lark Light, and it's a house that floats around the Earth. When their house is attacked by giant spiders, they are forced to use the escape pod, and they end up on the moon. Here they encounter even more dangerous creatures. They end up being rescued by Jack, a famous space pirate, who's much younger than anybody thought. It moves at a very fast pace. It's incredibly creative. It really kind of captures your imagination, and it's done in a light, like tongue-in-cheek type of style. This is more of a middle grade series, and again, there are 3 books in it: Lark Light, Starcross, and Moth Storm. And I just thought this was a fantastic series. I really enjoyed it. All right, going on to another one of a more middle grade steampunk series, and that is Leviathan. Again, this is by Scott Westerfield, so it is a more popular series, so you may have heard of it. The stories itself alternates between 2 different characters. The first is Alec. He's a 15-year-old Austrian prince whose parents have been assassinated by Germany, and he's being forced to flee the country. The second character is Darren, a young British girl who disguised herself as a boy named Dylan so she could join the British Air Force. Both characters end up meeting. They're embroiled in all this like alternate World War I things going up. It's very interesting because, like, I believe it was Britain has all like the really steampunky stuff, whereas all the Germany forces did this more like biomechanical approach to warfare. So that's where the Leviathans come in. It's definitely more of like a politically driven book, but the world building was super fun, and I liked both the characters and the alternating viewpoints, and it was very interesting, very engaging, and just kind of a fun world to be in. And that was a trilogy as well. The first book was Leviathan, the second is Behemoth, and the third is Goliath. So, all right, another young adult one that came out during the same time is kind of a Darkness, Strange and Deadly and all of that, and that is the Iron Codex by Caitlin Kittredge. I think I said that right, Kittredge. Yeah. This is got kind of a Lovecraftian spin to steampunk. It's got more of a dark flavor to it. This is about the city of Lovecraft that's ruled by proctors and powered by a great engine. There's a necrovirus that's being blamed for an epidemic of madness that's affecting certain people. And it's also being said to be the cause of these dark creatures that hunt in the streets at night. Aoif is a ward of the state and one of the only girls to make it into the School of Engines, which is one of the most prestigious schools in Lovecraft. Her family has a very dark history. They carry a latent form of this necrovirus that can make them go mad at their 16th birthday. So it's a very interesting world, very well built. It was never confusing, but just very intricate. There's a lot of really creative things in the story, and I really love the characters here too. It was a very neat blend of steampunk, gothic, dystopian, mystery, and fantasy elements. And this wasn't a trilogy, so the first book in it was The Iron Thorn, then The Nightmare Garden, and The Mirrored Shard. So, very good. All right. Another popular series, the Clockwork Century series by Cherry Priest. This has 5 books in it, and for some reason I'm missing the last book in this. I'm not sure what happened there. But it's each book kind of follows a different set of characters. They're all set in this very steampunky world. So for the first one, it follows a character named Lectivus Blue, who won this, well, it actually follows his daughter, but he won this contest to drill for gold in the Klondike, and his invention was this incredible bone-shaking drill engine. The only problem is the trial went wrong. It ripped apart Seattle and raised a blight, which is a poisonous gas that's turning the residents of Seattle into zombies. His widow, Briar Wilkes, lives outside the wall, and she's trying to raise their son, but dealing with a lot of hatred because of what her husband did. And it kind of is just nonstop action, a lot of danger, very cool steampunk machinery. It was really well done. And I don't know why I'm missing. This is a 5-book series, or maybe it's 4. It must be 4, and I must have just double copied. Anyways, it's either 4 or 5 books. I'll have to double check. But it's Bone Shaker, Clementine, Dreadnought, and Ganymede. And I do believe they feature different groups of characters. Sherry Priest is not my favorite writer because I just have a little bit of trouble with her writing style. But this was pretty well done. And this is my last series on the 5-star list. And the books in that are kind of, mixed. Like I think there's 3 I gave 5 stars and a couple I gave 3 stars. So it is was a little bit mixed for me. All right, so moving on to 4 stars. 4-star series for middle grade young adult steampunk. Oh, and the Bone Shaker series is more of a young adult kind of series. All right, 4 stars. This comes in with all the other ones, the Strange and Deadly and Iron Codex. During that time, there was another series, young adult series released called Mask of the Red Death by Bethany Griffin. This was about a deadly plague that decimated all of humanity, and we follow this girl named Araby Worth, who's kind of one of the lucky ones. Her father designed the masks that people... This takes on a whole new meaning now. Like, I read this a long time ago, but after reading my review of it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so relevant. Anyways, her father designed a special mask that cleanses the plague out so people can go outside without getting sick. Her brother gets killed. She ends up going with her friends to this place called the Debauchery Club, which is one place they can be safe without a mask. And because of what she hears there, she gets drawn to this deep political intrigue. This was a pretty fascinating read. There's a lot of like gray morality in here, and it's very much almost got that Great Gatsby feel to it. Like it's all about glittering decadence, even though people are like dying everywhere. It was an interesting blend of genres. The world was pretty cool. I was a little underwhelmed by Araby, the main protagonist. She's fairly passive, and she kind of just gets swept up into things rather than like directs herself into things. It had a pretty intricate plot. It was hard to guess what was going on, but it was easy enough to follow, and I ended up enjoying it. I didn't love it though, just because Araby was not like, I didn't gel with her as a character. So. All right, the next one on the list is a middle grade one, and that is the series called York by, this was a duology, and it's Mask of the Red Death is the first book, Dance of the Red Death is the second book. There's also a short story, Glitter and Doom, that takes place in between. All right, the next one is a trilogy, York by Laura Ruby. This has 3 books, The Shadow Cipher, The Clockwork Ghost, and Map of Stars. This is kind of a little bit different one. It's set in an alternate, like modern day New York, where technology kind of developed differently, like better. There's more clean technology because of this Morningstar family of geniuses that live there. Some kids band together to solve the old York cipher in an effort to find this Morningstar treasure. It was a really cool alternate world. There's a lot about cryptography and puzzle solving in here, which was really cool. And ciphers and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of fun. So you can kind of follow along and you can kind of solve the mysteries with the kids as you go through it. There's a lot of like, if you wanted to, you could like just sit down and try to do all these puzzles on your own. It was well done characters, a really good mystery, and like good family friendship dynamics in there as well. So that got 4 stars. All right. Next one that got 4 stars is a young adult one, but it's more of like a young adult, like romancy one, and that is the Steampunk Chronicles by Katie Cross. This was I think there's 3 books in there, but I did not read, well, maybe there's 5 books in here. I'm having trouble reading my notes. Anyways, so this consisted of The Girl in the Steel Corset, The Strange Case of Finley Jane, which I think was a short story, The Girl in the Clockwork Collar, The Girl with the Iron Touch, and The Girl with the Wind-Up Heart. I only read the first couple books in this. I gave 1 4 and 1 3. It's about a lady named Finley who's working as a lady maid when one of the young lords of the house accosts her. She's forced to call on her darker side to defend herself and ends up fleeing the job, only to be hit by a like steampunk type of cycle The young lord who hits her feels really bad, takes her back to his house to help her recuperate. And she's got to kind of learn to help to like figure out how to control her dark side. And I won't go into any more. It reads more like an adult romance, but it's got a lot of steampunk stuff in it, and it's probably more got like a PG-13 rating, so I'd say it's young adult. It was kind of a fun, light, good escapist read. It was not historically accurate, and the male leads were kind of stereotypical, but I loved it, and the action scenes were a lot of fun. And that was more like my review for the first book. The second book, I gave 3 out of 5 stars. It just wasn't really going much of anywhere, so I ended up not finishing that series. All right, the next one on here is another duology, and that is Of Metal and Wishes by Sarah Fine. There were 2 books, Of Metal and Wishes and Of Dreams and Rust. This is it was a steampunk young adult book about a girl who lives in a factory, and her father, who is a factory doctor, is there as well. It's a retelling of Phantom of the Opera and does a pretty good job of paralleling that story but putting us in this unique like steampunk world. The story started kind of rough, and the writing was kind of like stark and non-descriptive. But as I went on through it, I kind of got engaged in it. It was just kind of a neat world. It has kind of an Asian, like Chinese flair to it, and I liked it. It was pretty good steampunk mystery. All right, next one on the list of 4 stars is Gone with Respiration. This is another duology by Leah Hobble. The first book is Dearly Departed, and the second is Dearly Beloved. And this is another one of those like futuristic / we fell back into the past steampunk novels. So it takes place in the year 2195, where girl Nora lives in New Victoria, and it's kind of a strange mix of Victorian era and science fiction stuff. She was just kind of an evil aunt and her brother, and kind of unexpectedly, she finds herself gunning down mysterious killer zombies and getting kidnapped by people. There's complex politics, some crazy things, and likable characters. There were some flaws to the story. The beginning was a little bit sloppy. They're constantly switching viewpoints, and like between Nora and this other guy named Bram, and they sounded too much the same, so I kept getting confused about whose viewpoint I was reading. But it would be a fun read if you like steampunk zombie novels with some romance in there. There's just a lot of like terminology and politics that were kind of confusing at the beginning. So, okay, the next one is The Dark Unwinding, which is another duology by Sharon Cameron. First book in this is The Dark Unwinding, and the second one is A Spark Unseen. This is about a young woman named Catherine who's sent to her kind of mean aunt and old uncle's dark and gloomy mansion. She's supposed to go there to prove her uncle is mentally unfit so her aunt can inherit. But when she gets there, she finds out that there's a lot of secrets around the house. The steampunk part of the story is mainly focused around interesting clockwork contraptions that her uncle is making. That was pretty much it. The story almost feels more Victorian than steampunk, but there were some good steampunk parts in here. It's a fairly simple story. I did enjoy the subject and the mystery, the setting, and the characters. It was just a little simple for me, which is why I didn't give 5 stars. All right, the next one is kind of a unique one, and that is the Ruby Red Trilogy by Kirsten Jayer, and this was originally written in German and then translated to English. There's 3 books in it: Ruby Red, Sapphire Blue, and Emerald Green. This is about a girl named Gwen who has a cousin, Charlotte, who's been groomed from birth to deal with her time-traveling gene in her induction to the secret society of the Guardians. But things go very wrong when Gwen has the time-traveling gene instead of Charlotte. The characters were decent. The idea of time travel via genetic defect was pretty fascinating, but the whole Guardian Society and the purpose wasn't very well defined. The whole, like, when they go back in time to the Guardian Society, that's where you get some steampunk elements in there. There's a lot of world building in the first book and setting the scene, and it wasn't until the end of the first book that things started really moving. I ended up giving all the books in that series 4 stars. It was a really interesting concept, but, a little bit slow. Mysteries of the Cove is the next one on the list, and that is by J. Scott Savage. This is definitely a middle grade trilogy. First book are Fires of Invention. Second book are Gears of Revolution. Third book is Embers of Destruction. This book started kind of slow. The last part was enough to pull me in and make me want to read the rest of the series. It's marketed as middle grade steampunk, but it came across as more like middle grade dystopian. This society of Cove is more of a dystopian society than a steampunk society, and the real steampunk element is that the heroes are like building big mechanical steampunk things. Um, there are some really unique story elements at the end, and I ended up enjoying it, and the characters are like solving a lot of riddles, so that was fun. All right. In the series I'm still reading, but made stop again, is the next one, and that's the Magnificent Devices series by Shelley Adina. There are 22 books in this series right now, and at least the first 4 or 5 are definitely more of a young adult age level. I'm just going to go through the first 3 in Our Lady of Devices, Her Own Devices, and Magnificent Devices. As I said, there's 21 books in the series right now, so if you want to go look up all the rest of them, feel free to. This is about a young woman named Claire Trevelyan. It's kind of a typical setup, like her mother's trying to marry off to her Viscount, or she wants to go to university, and then when her father dies, her mother and brother, for various circumstances, have to flee the city, and Claire's left on her own to make her own living. There's some nice, so my main complaint about this series, I've started it and stopped it a couple times, is it's fine and it's nice. And that's like pretty much what I can say about it. There's a lot of adventure, there's a lot of steampunk stuff, but the characters are all very nice to each other. And sometimes I feel like there's just not enough conflict to like drive the story forward. So I just find it kind of boring. And we see, I like it okay. I mean, I wasn't giving them 4 stars. I just have other stuff I'd rather read. This one, I only read the first book in it, and that is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco and James Patterson. This one has 4 books right now. The first one is Stalking Jack the Ripper. The second one is Hunting Prince Dracula. Third is Escaping from Houdini, and then fourth is Capturing the Devil. I would actually like to go back and continue reading this series. I had a lot to read at the time, and I just ended up reading the first book. But it's about a heroine named Audrey who's kind of straddling the world of well-bred noble lady and the dark world of postmortem dissection, which she's very interested in. And she's kind of a typical steampunk heroine. She bridles at the concept of what it means to be female and rails against all the restrictions put on her by the men in her family. And she finds a way to sneak out and like help with tracking down these killers anyways. It's got a lot of investigation and quite a bit of gore. It's more of maybe on the thriller side of the historical steampunk thing of things here. I'm trying to figure out if I should cut this off because we are getting a little bit long, but we're still in the 4-star books. All right, the next book is in this list. The next series in this list is the Hungry City Chronicles by, again, Philip Reeves. I only read the first book in this one as well, Mortal Engines, and this is one that I would like to go back and finish reading. There's been movies with Mortal Engine movie and all that, so a lot of people know the concept behind this. It's the idea is that cities eat each other for resources. I had a little bit of trouble kind of suspending my belief in this. It just seemed a little bit too out there for me. It was kind of hard to process and envision. The book jumps between like a million characters in the beginning, so I just never really engaged with any of them. So I read the first book. I liked the idea, but it was like as soon as I started getting in the story, I would jump to some other character. And I would like to go back and read this. This is 4 books: Mortal Engine, Predator's Gold, Infernal Devices, and A Dark Plane. And maybe someday I will. But the first book was good. I just didn't love it. The next one is a duology where I read the first book again, but not the second book, and that is The Peculiar by Stefan Bachmann. This takes place in alternate London where the Fae kind of fell into our world. The story follows 2 characters, Bartholomew and Arthur Jellyby. So Bartholomew kind of lives in the fairy slums, and Arthur Jellyby is on the London Council. So Arthur wants to kind of coast through life unnoticed, but he ends up drawing into this mystery surrounding the disappearance of peculiars, and this puts him in contact with Bartholomew, and they're trying to figure out why these peculiars are disappearing. I liked it fine. It was okay. I didn't engage with the characters very well. I do like character-driven stories, and this was more of a political mystery type of thing. The first book is The Peculiar, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. The second book is The Whatnot, and I didn't read the second book. All right, next book on the series is The Illumination Paradox. This is another young adult steampunk series. It was set in a very creative world. It's about Okay, so when the main character, Islet Ellsworth, was young, there was a strange flash that kind of shattered the world and hid the sun behind these murky clouds forever. Now that Islet is older, she wants to find her father's invention, a device called the Illuminator, because she thinks it can like save everybody from the flash that happened initially. She also has these seizures that she has to hide lest she be accused of having madness, and she wants to save the world. So the first book in that is Lumiere, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. These are all by Jacqueline Garlick. And then Noir, I gave 3 stars, and then I did not read the last book in the series, which is Soleil, Soleil. Okay, next book is more of a middle grade one. This is Mechanica by Betsy Cornwall. There are 2 books in the series. The first book is Mechanica. The second is Ventress. So if you know Cinderella, you pretty much know the basis of the story, because this follows the Cinderella story very closely. In this case, though, it follows Nicolette, whose mother is a genius inventor. After her death, Nicolette's father remarried. Now Nicolette's new stepmother and stepsisters are kind of mean, and she ends up as a servant. On her 16th birthday, she finds a mysterious letter with clues leading to her mother's workshop, and from there, Nicolette's determined to kind of make her own path and invent things. So it was okay. My main complaint is that a lot of the interesting aspects to this world weren't really expanded on, and the story seemed kind of oversimplified. I really would have liked to see them dig a little deeper into this world, and I did read Mechanica, which was the first book, and gave it 4 stars. Ventress, I gave 3 stars. Okay, so going into a Colin Gleason series, Stoker and Holmes. This is a young adult series. This is told from 2 points of view. The first is that of Mina Holmes, which is Sherlock's niece, and the second is that of Evelyn Stoker, which is Bram Stoker's sister. And this actually ties into Gleason's Gardella series, which is an adult paranormal romance series. The Evelyn Stoker is actually a descendant of the Gardellas, who are vampire hunters. Anyways, both girls get contacted by mysterious means to look into a number of deaths of young women. The deaths are staged as suicides, but they involve these clockwork scarabs. Adding to this mix is the strange appearance of a young man who says he's from the future. There were some excellent characters in here and some very witty dialogue, but it wasn't very deep. There isn't much world building. Everything was pretty predictable. I had fun reading it. It was a quick read, and it was easy. It was just an easy read. Gleason's book, she's kind of hit or miss for me, and her books kind of sometimes will just end up a little bit too simple for me. I did read the first, I don't know if there's more than this. I read 3 books in the series: The Clockwork Scarab, The Spirit Glass Charade, and The Chess Queen Enigma. And I gave the first one 3.5, and then the second 2 I gave 4 stars. All right. We're over half an hour, but I'm almost at the end here, I think. So I got a few more to go through. 3-star. So these are 3-star steampunk series. The first one is Metal and Lace. Again, this is a trilogy. I only read the first book in it. The 3 books are Camelot Burning, Avalon Rising, and Excalibur Reigning. This is all written by Catherine Rose. This is a basically Camelot steampunk series. It's about a young woman named Vivian, who's the handmaid to Guinevere. We join the story when Guinevere's about to marry King Arthur. Vivian has a secret life as an apprentice to Merlin, where she's learning to build all these steampunk devices. Morgan Le Fay shows up, causes trouble. I had a lot of trouble. I usually like Arthurian retellings, and the idea of blending steampunk in sounded really cool to me. However, I just really struggled to get through this book. It just took me a long time to read. I was falling asleep while I was reading. I kept pointing out and wandering off to do it. It just was not holding my attention. Not really sure why, but I ended up giving the first one 3 stars and not continuing it. The next one is The Viper and the Urchin by Celine Jean. There are 9 books in the series right now. I only read the first one. I actually got this through Kindle Unlimited. The first book was called The Bloodless Assassin, and it's about an assassin named the Viper and a young urchin named Rory. When Rory helps out the Viper, she finds his most embarrassing secret and ends up blackmailing him. So she basically wants him to train her in combat so she can keep his secret. Things start to go very sideways when they end up in a plot to save the ruler of the city that they're in. The first part of this was very boring, and I didn't really like the characters. Things started to get better towards the end of the book, and this is one that I might pick up again at some point, but for now, I only read the first book. All right, next series is The Lotus Wars by Jay Kristoff. This is another one that was popular, pretty popular when it came back out. I don't even know why I finished this. I gave it such low ratings. This was a trilogy. Storm Dancer, I gave 2.5 stars. Kinslayer, I gave 4 stars. And Insinger, I gave 3 stars. This is a very like Asian-themed steampunk world. It's about Yokiko and her father. And they're giving in a quest to hunt down a thunder tiger for the shogun. It's impossible because they don't exist anymore, and they must either return with the thunder tiger or forfeit their lives. They end up, there's like airships and different steampunk weapons and all this kind of stuff. My big issue with this was just the writing, the flow of the writing. There was not enough description. There was too much info dumping. It was very hard to read in the beginning. The characters were okay, but I never really liked them. And there were just a lot of distractions in the story and also some inconsistencies in the plot. So this one, averaged out at 3, but the first book I really didn't like. But for some reason, I kept reading the series. All right. The next one is the Makers Trilogy, which I believe is more of a middle grade series. It's about a young woman named Sophia Timms, who comes from a family of explorers and cartographers. And for generations, they've been traveling and mapping the new world. The world changed in 1799 when the Great Disruption hit. All the continents were flung into different time periods. And so, this first part of this book dealt with a lot of politics, which I'm not a huge person about reading politics. And then we moved on to more of adventure, which I did enjoy. We never really got to the politics and the impact they have on the rest of the world, and it felt kind of disjointed to me. I also feel like the story didn't tie together very well through the whole thing. This was a trilogy that's by S.E. Grove. The first book is The Glass Sentence. Second is The Golden Specific, and the third is The Crimson Skew. I just didn't like the first book. All right, so on to a very, very popular series, the Infernal Devices series by Cassandra Clare. I'm just going to go flat out say I have never liked Claire's writing. I have tried to read a lot of her series, and I just don't like it. I don't like her writing. It doesn't get along with me. It just feels really awkward, and there's a lot of like over-explaining that happens, and I've never been a fan. But this is about Tessa Gray, who's going to join her brother in London after the death of her aunt. However, when she arrives, her brother is not there, but instead, the Dark Sisters pick her up with a note from her brother ensuring that he trusts them. While they end up imprisoning Tessa and forcing to use the strange powers she possesses, and she's desperate to escape. If you've read all the Dark Devices and all that series by Cassandra Clare, this all wraps into that. But it does take place in like a steampunk world and in the past. So it's a trilogy. Clockwork Angel is the first book. Clockwork Prince is the second. Clockwork Princess is the third. I read the first book. I didn't like it. Just like every other Cassandra Clare book I've read, I haven't liked it. So I'm not reading any more books by her. It's like the third or fourth series I've tried to read by her and haven't liked. All right, the next series on here is the Blackburn Chronicles by Raquel Burns. This is another trilogy. I read the first book in it. The first book is called The Tremblers. The second is The Wind Reapers, and the third is The Chasm Walkers. This is about Charlotte Blackburn, who's a gifted tinkerer who has lived her whole life in the electric Tesla dome that shields the survivors of the Great Calamity. When her father's abducted and a strange sickness starts transforming men into monsters, she discovered that the technology wasn't protecting her. It's a steampunk story. It's like an alternate historical US. I usually love worlds and books like this. And it started out very promising, but kind of went downhill. I did enjoy a lot of the devices and action scenes, but the writing was really hard to follow and the plot got really predictable, so I stopped reading it. Another one that I started but did not finish is the Antipedian Queen by Felicity Banks. This is another trilogy. The first book is Heart of Brass, the second is Silver and Stone, and the third is Iron Lights. I only read the first book and I gave it 3 stars. And it is about a young woman named Emmeline who's trying to marry well to provide for her family, but her enormous secrets causes her issues. She has a mechanical heart and a mechanical torso. Because of these issues, she's accused of theft and sent to Australia. And there she is forced to escape slavery and try to make a living on her own. I really liked the Australian setting. It was very unique. I enjoyed the characters, and I liked the idea of metal bestowing powers and abilities on people, which was a theme throughout the novel. But the story needed a lot of work and a lot of editing. It was really contrived. It just wasn't written well. It flowed pretty bad, and it felt very amateur. And There is one 2-star steampunk series on this list, and that is The Adventures of Baron von Monocle by John Del Arras. There are 5 books in the series. The first one is for Steam and Country, and that is the one that I read. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I did love the idea of this farm girl named Zara inheriting her father's airship and going on all these adventures. However, the story took a really long time to get moving and never drew me in. I ended up not finishing this mainly because the narration was on the audiobook was really bad. So don't do this one on audiobook if you want to check it out. I also didn't like the storyline. It was just really slow and it was awkwardly paced and the whole thing was just bad. This is a case of really bad audiobook narration though, and sometimes I have a little bit of trouble like digging out the story through the awful narration. So there is a chance that, if I had read it or if I had read future books like in paper format, maybe it would have redeemed itself, but it was pretty bad. All right, that was a lot of me talking and a lot of steampunk books. So I hope that you guys enjoy this. And I will talk to you. I managed to get through it all in one really long 40-minute video. I'm planning on doing the next steampunk video on adult steampunk series. And that might take me a couple weeks to get through because this one took quite a bit to relook all these up and go through, find their plot summaries and get them all organized by rating and review and all that. So it's probably going to take a bit to get the Steampunk Adult series together. But this was the Steampunk Young Adult and Middle Grade series that I have read. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found something new. If you have some series that you have read that you really loved, I would love it if you commented down below on them. I'm always looking for new steampunk series. It's a very particular genre that's a little bit hard to find stuff in. And if you did enjoy this video, I do record videos every Wednesday and Saturday. Wednesday is something like this, best of lists, different genres of books I'm talking about, whereas Saturday is usually a stacking the shelves. I try to do them every Wednesday and Saturday, but don't always succeed, so there's that. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this. Please comment about any other steampunk books that you have read that you have loved, and have a great week of reading. I will talk to you later. Bye.